Welcome to Listen English Story. Today's title is The Gift of Love, $1.87. That was all she had. She had saved it penny by penny, carefully budgeting for meat and other groceries. Della counted it 3 times. $1.87, and tomorrow would be Christmas. There was nothing to do but fall on the bed and cry. So Della did just that. While she slowly calmed down, we can look around their home. They lived in a furnished room that cost $8 a week. There isn't much more to say about it. In the hallway below was a mailbox too small to hold a letter. There was an electric bell that didn't work. Beside the door was a name, Mr. James Dillingham Young. When the name was first put there, Mr. James Dillingham Young was earning $30 a week. Now, with his income reduced to $20 a week, the name seemed too grand. It should probably have been shortened to Mr. James D. Young. But when he entered their furnished rooms, his name became very short indeed. Mrs. James Dillingham Young warmly hugged him and called him Jim. You have already met her. She is Della. Della finished crying and wiped her face. She stood by the window, staring out without interest. Tomorrow would be Christmas, and she had only $1.87 to buy Jim a gift. She had saved as much as she could for months, but this was all she had. $20 a week didn't go far. Everything had cost more than she had expected. It always did. Only $1.87 to buy a gift for Jim. For Jim. She had spent many happy hours planning something nice for him. Something nearly good enough. Something almost worthy of Jim. There was a mirror between the windows of the room. Perhaps you've seen the type of mirror in $8 furnished rooms. It was very narrow. A person could only see a small part of themselves at a time. But if they were very thin and moved quickly, they might get a good view. Della, being quite thin, had mastered this. Suddenly, she turned from the window and stood before the mirror. Her eyes were shining, but her face was pale. Quickly, she let down her hair to its full length. The James Dillingham Youngs were very proud of 2 possessions. One was Jim's gold watch, which had belonged to his father and his grandfather. The other was Della's hair. If a queen lived nearby, Della would have washed and dried her hair where the queen could see it. Della knew her hair was more beautiful than any of the queen's jewels and gifts. If a king lived in the same house with all his riches, Jim would have shown his watch every time they met. Jim knew no king had anything so valuable. Della's beautiful hair fell around her, shining like a stream of brown water. It reached below her knee, almost like a dress. Then she quickly and nervously put it back up on her head. She paused for a moment, standing still as a few tears ran down her face. She put on her old brown coat and her old brown hat. With the bright light still in her eyes, she hurried out the door and down the street. She stopped in front of a sign that read, Mrs. Sofroni. Hair articles of all kinds. Della ran up to the 2nd floor and stopped to catch her breath. Mrs. Sofroni, who was large, very pale, and cold-eyed, looked at her. Will you buy my hair? Della asked. I buy hair, said Mrs. Sofroni. Take off your hat and let me see it. The brown waterfall of hair fell down. $20, said Mrs. Sofroni, lifting the hair to feel its weight. Give it to me quickly, said Della. The next 2 hours seemed to fly by. Della went from one shop to another, looking for a gift for Jim. She finally found it. It was perfect for Jim and no one else. There was nothing like it in any other shop, and she had checked every shop in the city. It was a gold watch chain, simply made. Its value was in its rich, pure material. Because it was so plain and simple, you could tell it was very valuable. All good things are like that. It was good enough for Jim's watch. As soon as she saw it, she knew Jim had to have it. It was just like him. Both the chain and Jim had quietness and value. She paid $21 for it and hurried home with the chain and 87 cents. With that chain on his watch, Jim could check the time anywhere he went. Though the watch was very fine, it never had a fine chain. He sometimes looked at it only when no one was watching. When Della got home, she started to calm down and think more clearly. She tried to hide the sad signs of what she had done. Love and generous giving can leave deep marks, and it's never easy to cover them. In 40 minutes, her hair looked a bit better. With her short hair, she looked like a schoolboy. She stared at herself in the mirror for a long time. If Jim doesn't kill me, she thought, he'll think I look like a girl who sings and dances for money. But what else could I do with just $1.87? At 7, Jim's dinner was ready. He was never late. Della held the watch chain and sat near the door where he always entered. She heard his steps in the hall, and her face went pale. She often said little prayers about everyday things, and now she prayed, "Please, God, make him think I'm still pretty." The door opened, and Jim walked in. He looked very thin and wasn't smiling. Poor fellow, he was only 22 and had a family to take care of. He needed a new coat and had nothing to cover his cold hands. Jim stopped inside the door, as quiet as a hunting dog near a bird. He looked at Della with a strange expression that filled her with fear. It wasn't anger or surprise or anything she expected. He just looked at her strangely. Della went to him. "Jim, dear," she cried, "don't look at me like that. I had my hair cut off and sold it. I couldn't go through Christmas without giving you a gift. My hair will grow back. You won't mind, will you? My hair grows fast. It's Christmas, Jim. Let's be happy. You don't know what a nice gift I got for you." "You cut off your hair?" Jim asked slowly. He seemed to struggle to understand what had happened. "Cut it off and sold it?" said Della. "Don't you like me now? I'm still me, Jim, even without my hair." Jim looked around the room. "You say your hair is gone," he said. "You don't have to look for it," said Della. "It's sold and gone. It's Christmas Eve. Be good to me because I sold it for you." "Maybe the hairs on my head could be counted," she said, "but no one could ever count my love for you. Shall we eat dinner, Jim? Jim put his arms around Della. Let's look away for a moment. Whether you make $8 a week or $1,000,000 a year, how different are they? Someone might give an answer, but it would be wrong. The Magi brought valuable gifts, but this wasn't one of them. My meaning will become clear soon. Jim took something wrapped in paper from inside his coat and threw it on the table. I want you to understand me, Dell, he said. A haircut couldn't make me love you any less. But if you open that package, you might understand how I felt when I came in. With trembling fingers, Della unwrapped the paper. She let out a cry of joy, which quickly turned to tears. Inside were the comms Della had admired in a shop window for a long time. Beautiful comms with jewels, perfect for her beautiful hair. She knew they were too expensive for her to buy. She had looked at them with no hope of ever owning them. And now they were hers, but her hair was gone. She held them to her heart and finally looked up, saying, "My hair grows so fast, Jim." Then she jumped up and exclaimed, "Oh, oh!" Jim hadn't seen his gift yet. She held it out to him in her open hand. The gold chain seemed to shine with her own warm and loving spirit. "Isn't it perfect, Jim? I searched all over town to find it. You'll have to check your watch 100 times a day now. Give me your watch. I want to see how they look together." Jim sat down and smiled. "Della," he said, "let's put our Christmas gifts away for a while. They're too nice to use right now. I sold the watch to buy the comms. Now I think we should have our dinner." The Magi, as you know, were wise men who brought gifts to the newborn Christ child. They were the first to give Christmas gifts. Being wise, their gifts were undoubtedly wise ones. Here, I've told you the story of two people who were not wise. Each sold their most valuable possession to buy a gift for the other. But let me say one last thing to the wise of today. Of all who give gifts, these two were the wisest. Of all who give and receive gifts, they are the wisest. Thank you so much for watching until the end.